Hello and welcome to Back to the Science. I'm Dr. Susan Oliver and I'm a scientist, and this is Cindy Oliver and she's a dog. Now, before I start this video, I just wanted to thank everyone who has wished me well with my cataract surgery. I really appreciate it. Both eyes are now done and the world is brighter, and I mean that literally. Now, while I've been busy with my surgeries, Dr. John Campbell has been busy making misinformation videos. There are too many for me to cover all of them, but one that particularly caught my attention was a video about vaccination and multiple sclerosis. Let's have a look.
Last week, the World Health Organization put out a release showing that there was a possible causal relationship between COVID-19 vaccine and multiple sclerosis, and we're allowed to report on this because it is an official WHO paper. We're limited to other things we can report, but we can report this. Now, this is the paper here. Now, it says COVID-19 vaccination can induce multiple sclerosis via cross-reactivity with T helper cells. So quite an admission from the World Health Organization.
Wow, did I hear that correctly? According to John, the WHO have put out a release stating that there is a link between COVID vaccination and multiple sclerosis. And he doesn't just say that this information comes from the WHO once, he repeats it again and again and again.
Well, the one I'm allowed to talk about is this one because it's a WHO publication. Can induce. Now, this is the WHO, so can induce. Now, this is pretty significant in itself because here we have the WHO actually admitting that SARS coronavirus 2 vaccines can cause autoimmune phenomena. It's confirmed by the World Health Organization disease, and that is what is happening in this case, according to the WHO circular, which is still there, whereas the new WHO paper goes further and says it's now likely. So there we go. World Health Organization, quite surprising really. COVID-19 vaccinations can induce multiple sclerosis from the WHO itself. And I can tell you about this one because it is an official WHO site. Let's hope the WHO publish more so I'm free to discuss more pathology.
Would anyone be surprised if I told you that John is lying and, in fact, the WHO has not made any claims about COVID vaccination and multiple sclerosis? So this is a page we get when we click on the link provided by John, although I'm showing you the English version as opposed to the Portuguese version that John linked to. As you can see, it's not a WHO release. It's not a WHO study. It's just a listing in a WHO database of studies about COVID-19. And if we click on the link to find the actual source of the study, we see that it is in fact an abstract for a poster presented at an international conference in October 22. And it was one of 1,700 abstracts included in the conference proceedings. So not only is John wrong about it being a WHO release, he is also wrong about it being released last week. For those of you who don't know, conference abstracts are not peer-reviewed and they don't contain enough detail for those with expertise in the field to assess their validity. Now, back to the WHO research database. The homepage for the database is here, and if you scroll down on the page, you will come to our disclaimer, which you can see here. The third paragraph of the disclaimer is particularly pertinent, and I'll just blow it up so we can read it more easily. By listing publications in this database and providing links to external sites does not mean that WHO endorses or recommends those publications or sites or has verified the content contained within them. The database has been compiled without warranty of any kind, either expressed or implied. The responsibility for the interpretation and use of publications included in this database lies with the reader. In no event shall WHO be liable for damages arising from its use. So WHO is making it very clear that they do not endorse anything included in the database. But hey, anyone can make a mistake and repeat the mistake again and again and again. But Is this the only falsehood that John shares in the video?
Both natural infection and mRNA-based vaccinations can be accompanied by transient autoimmune phenomena. Now, this is pretty significant in itself, because here we have the WHO actually admitting that SARS coronavirus 2 vaccines can cause autoimmune phenomena.
So here's a screenshot of what John claimed the WHO said in the clip that we just watched. Both natural infection and the mRNA-based vaccinations can be accompanied by transient autoimmune phenomena or onset of autoimmune diseases. Now, let's ignore the fact that the WHO didn't say anything. Is that what the article actually said? No. What it said was both natural infection and, to a much lower extent, the mRNA-based vaccinations can be accompanied by transient autoimmune phenomena or onset of autoimmune diseases. John left out 5 words, and those words are to a much lower extent. He is deliberately hiding the fact that this is much more likely to occur following natural vaccination. And if you're a fan of John's and you have any reasonable explanation as to why John deliberately left out those 5 words to completely change the meaning of the sentence, please let me know in the comments. Now, back to the conference abstract. It doesn't provide any references for the claims it makes regarding infection and, to a much lesser extent, vaccination being accompanied by transient autoimmune phenomena or onset of autoimmune diseases. So we can't assess the validity of the claim. But we do know that a study was published looking at this after the date that the conference abstract was published. This is a study here, and it was published in Nature Communications. And what this study showed was that the COVID mRNA vaccines are not associated with autoimmunity, but SARS-CoV-2 infection is. And the lack of increased autoimmunity following COVID mRNA vaccination was even the case in people who suffered from autoimmune diseases, including multiple sclerosis. There have also been a number of studies looking at the relapse rate following vaccination in MS patients. And this systematic review here analysed them as well as pharmacovigilance registries. And this was their conclusion. COVID-19 vaccination does not appear to increase the risk of relapse and serious adverse events in MS. Weighted against the risk of SARS-CoV-2 related complications and MS exacerbations, these safety data provide compelling pro-vaccination arguments for MS patients.
So getting back to the paper, finally we found pro-inflammatory T cell clones. So in other words, the T cells were involved as well. Now, the T cell involved here just seems to be the T helper cells. Whether other ones were involved, we're not told. But anyway, these pro-inflammatory T cell clones, like the CD helper cell, the CD4 cell, they recognise spike protein and immunodominant myelin-based proteins. In other words, they're beating up on the myelin sheath as well as the spike protein. And as we said, myelin oligodendrocyte glycoprotein peptides, which have previously been implicated in multiple sclerosis.
Now, this is a fairly accurate description of what the abstract says, but John has actually hit on a major deficiency of the work. There are a lot of things that the researchers haven't looked at. John points out that they didn't look at other types of T cells, but there are more fundamental things that they didn't look at. For example, they didn't do a control group with people who got MS prior to the pandemic to see if they also had cross-reactive T cells for spike protein and myelin peptides. And they also didn't test to see if there were other cross-reactive T cells from other viruses in the 2 patients included in the case series. Very good. And this is important because we know from research before the pandemic that T cell clones derived from MS patients show cross-reactivity with common human coronaviruses and myelin. And we also know that T cells taken from airway samples of patients pre-pandemic are able to cross-react with spike protein from SARS-CoV-2. Therefore, finding T cell clones that are cross-reactive for spike protein and myelin isn't necessarily a smoking gun pointing to the vaccine. Anyway, back to John and what, for me, was the most bizarre part of the video. Cindy can't even watch it.
Now, post-misrepresent research on multiple sclerosis vaccines found by 2 WHO databases. Now, the fact-checkers have helpfully waded in on this, and quite a few fact-checkers, it's obviously put the wind up them a bit. Very good of these fact-checkers to tell us what's going on, so we don't need to bother thinking for ourselves, but I think we'll pass on it because I think we do like to think for ourselves.
So John is letting everyone know that there is a fact check available on this information, but he is suggesting that people don't pay attention to it because they can think for themselves. Surely if he really wants people to think for themselves, he should encourage them to read the fact check after viewing his video and let people decide for themselves if his information is actually correct. Of course, if they did do that, they would know straight away that John is telling porkies, and the multiple sclerosis vaccination claims do not come from the WHO. They would also know that they come from a non-peer-reviewed conference abstract and the limitations involved with that. And they could even read what one of the authors of the abstract said, which puts it into perspective. And I will just read that out to you now. Roland Martin, a neurology professor at the University of Zurich, who was one of the authors of the research, said the work shows that the vaccine was related to the onset of MS, at least in the 2 patients studied. But he conceded that the wording of the abstract is probably too strong, since there are many other possible causes for MS, including genetic predisposition and environmental factors. The issue is very important, and I hope that the usefulness of the vaccines will not be questioned by our observation, as there is no doubt that the risks for triggering MS are higher with the natural infection based on current data, he wrote in an email on Sunday. However, there is some good news related to John's dodgy video. It was so egregious that it brought Professor Greg Tucker-Kellogg out of hibernation, and he has made another brilliant misinformation debunking video after a year's hiatus. And if you haven't watched his video, I highly recommend it because in addition to some of the things that I have covered, he provides a lot more detail on what happens at scientific conferences and the value of different levels of scientific evidence. And I will provide a link to Greg's video in this video's description, as well as links to the various studies that I've mentioned. But please remember, this video is about the science, but you shouldn't take it as medical advice. For that, you should speak to your medical practitioner. If you've got this far, thank you for listening. And if you've liked, shared, or commented on the video, double thank you, because that helps the algorithm and means that more people will see the video. And of course, thank you to everyone who has bought me a coffee or little Cindy here a treat. We really appreciate your support. We will be continuing to make videos about the science in the future. So if you'd like to see them, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you.